They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but tonight it's being served with champagne and a multi-billion-dollar acquisition contract. Everyone at the Blackwood Gala thought they knew the story. Adrian Blackwood, the untouchable tech mogul, and the young model hanging off his arm. They thought his wife was at home crying into her pillows. They were wrong. Dead wrong. Because when the double doors opened to reveal the mystery investor holding the fate of the company in her hands, it wasn't a stranger. It was the woman Adrian had underestimated for 10 years. And she didn't come to save him. She came to bury him. This is the story of the dinner that changed everything. The penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was silent, save for the hum of the climate control and the distant muffled roar of Manhattan far below. Serafina Blackwood stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting the clasp of a diamond necklace that had cost more than most people earned in a decade. It was a gift from her husband, Adrian. An apology gift, technically. He had missed their 10th anniversary dinner last week. Business in Tokyo, he had said via text message. Serafina knew Tokyo was actually a suite at the St. Regis, just 10 blocks away, and business was a 23-year-old Instagram influencer named Chloe Vane. Serafina's expression in the mirror didn't shift. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried over Adrian Blackwood in 3 years. The tears had stopped the day she realized that her brilliance, the mind that had graduated summa cum laude from Wharton and quietly structured the tax loopholes that saved Adrian's company, Blackwood Dynamics Millions, was invisible to him. To Adrian, she was just the trophy he had acquired before he became a billionaire, a relic of a time when he needed a respectable partner. Now he wanted Flash. He wanted Chloe. "Madam." Serafina turned. It was Beatrice, the housekeeper, standing in the doorway with a look of pained sympathy. Beatrice knew. Everyone knew. The tabloids had been subtle, but the blind items on page 6 weren't hard to decipher. "The car is downstairs, Mrs. Blackwood. But Mr. Blackwood just called the driver. He said you shouldn't come to the gala tonight." Serafina's lips quirked into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Did he now?" He said it's a high-stakes environment, and he doesn't want you to be bored. He said you should rest." Beatrice looked down, unable to meet her employer's eyes. "That was thoughtful of him," Serafina said, her voice smooth as silk. She reached for her clutch, a vintage Hermès piece. "But plans have changed, Beatrice. I won't be attending as Adrian's wife." Beatrice looked up confused. "Madame, I'm attending as his boss. He just doesn't know it yet." Serafina walked past the housekeeper, the train of her dress, a custom deep emerald gown that looked like liquid money trailing behind her. She wasn't going to the gala in the family Rolls-Royce. She had a separate car waiting. A blacked-out Escalade sent by the Aurelius Group, a private equity firm, so exclusive that even Adrian had only heard whispers of it. For the last 2 years, while Adrian was busy buying yachts and flaunting Chloe at business lunches, Serafina had been busy too. She hadn't been shopping. She had been trading. Using her maiden name and a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, she had quietly been buying up distressed assets, flipping them and accumulating a war chest of capital. And when Blackwood Dynamics hit a cash flow crisis 3 months ago, due to Adrian's reckless acquisition of a failing AI startup, he had reached out to the market for a savior. He needed a cash injection of $500 million to keep the wolves from the door. He had signed the preliminary deal with the Aurelius Group last week. He had never met the CEO, only the intermediaries. He was arrogant enough to assume the CEO was some old money patriarch from Switzerland. He was about to find out that the patriarch was the woman he left at home. As Serafina stepped into the elevator, she checked her phone. A text from Adrian. "Don't wait up. Networking will go late. Love you." She typed a reply, then deleted it. She put the phone away. "I love you too, Adrian," she whispered to the empty elevator. "I love watching you burn." The grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was dripping in gold and crystals. It was the annual Tech Horizon Gala, the biggest night of the year for New York's elite. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering flutes of Dom Perignon to men in bespoke tuxedos and women who weighed less than their jewelry. In the center of the room, holding court, was Adrian Blackwood. He was undeniably handsome, 6'2", with salt and pepper hair and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He radiated power. And hanging onto his arm, looking like a glittering ornament, was Chloe Vane. Chloe was wearing a dress that was technically red, but mostly non-existent. It was low-cut, high-slit, and screamed for attention. She was laughing too loudly at a joke made by the CEO of a rival firm, her hand resting possessively on Adrian's chest. "Adrian, you old dog," chuckled Benedict Thorne. "No relation to the band names, just a common elite name, a hedge fund manager from Greenwich. Where is the lovely Serafina tonight? I haven't seen her in ages." Adrian didn't even flinch. He took a sip of his scotch. "Serafina. You know how she is, Ben. She finds these things tedious. She prefers her gardening and domestic projects. She's not really cut out for the heavy lifting of the business world." Chloe giggled, tracing the rim of her glass. "She's so quaint. I think it's sweet. Someone has to keep the home fires burning, while the adults talk business, right, Adrian?" A few people in the circle exchanged awkward glances. The disrespect was palpable. It was one thing to have a mistress. It was another to bring her to the company's biggest night and openly mock the wife who had stood by him when Blackwood Dynamics was operating out of a garage in Brooklyn. Besides, Adrian continued, his voice booming slightly as his ego swelled, "Tonight isn't about the past. It's about the future. As you all know, Blackwood is on the verge of a historic partnership. The Aurelius Group is officially coming on board as our primary investor tonight." "The Aurelius Group," Benedict raised an eyebrow. "Nobody knows who runs that fund, Adrian. You're signing over 40% of your equity to a ghost." "I don't care if it's a ghost, a goblin, or the devil himself." Adrian smirked, pulling Chloe closer. "Their money is green, and with their capital I'm going to crush the competition. I'm unstoppable." He raised his glass for a toast. "To the future, and to upgrading." He winked at Chloe. The circle laughed, mostly out of obligation. Suddenly the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The murmuring crowd fell silent. A spotlight hit the main stage, where the event organizer, a nervous man named Arthur, adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur's voice echoed, "we have a surprise addition to tonight's program. Mr. Blackwood has been teasing the new partnership all evening. Well, the representative of the Aurelius Group has just arrived to sign the final accolades and make a formal introduction." Adrian straightened his tuxedo jacket, looking smug. "Showtime," he whispered to Chloe. "Stay here, babe. I need to go shake hands with the money." "Make sure you tell him I said hi," Chloe cooed. Adrian walked toward the stage, waving to the applause. He stood next to Arthur, looking out over the sea of faces. He felt like a king. "Please welcome," Arthur announced, gesturing to the grand double doors at the back of the room. "The managing director and majority shareholder of the Aurelius Group." The doors groaned open. Adrian put on his best winning smile, ready to greet a Swiss banker or a Wall Street shark. A silhouette stepped into the light. The figure was feminine. The click of heels on the marble floor echoed through the silent room. As she walked into the spotlight, the emerald dress shimmered like dragon scales. The diamonds at her throat caught the light, blinding in their intensity. But it was the face that made the air leave the room. Adrian's smile froze. His brain short-circuited. He blinked, thinking perhaps the scotch had been spiked. It was Serafina. But it wasn't the Serafina he knew. This woman didn't have her hair in a messy bun. Her hair was a cascading wave of dark silk. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating eyes that looked like flint. She walked with a predator's grace, head held high, looking directly at him. The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted like a wildfire. "Is that? It's his wife. What is she doing? Did they say Aurelius Group?" Chloe dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one looked. All eyes were on Serafina. She reached the stage. She didn't look at the audience. She turned slowly, deliberately to face her husband. Adrian's microphone was still on. "Serafina," he stammered, his voice amplified across the hall. What are you doing here? You're confusing everyone. This is for the Aurelius investor. You need to go back to the table." He reached out to grab her arm to usher her away before she embarrassed him. Serafina sidestepped him effortlessly. She stepped up to the podium and leaned into the mic. Her voice was calm, deep, and resonated with terrifying authority. "I am not confused, Adrian," she said. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. "I am the Aurelius Group." The silence in the grand ballroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for the aftermath of a gunshot. 300 of New York's most influential people tech giants, venture capitalists, socialites, and politicians, stood frozen, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths. Adrian Blackwood stared at his wife. His brain was frantically trying to reboot, attempting to reconcile the image of the woman who usually wore cardigans and tended to her hydrangeas with the high-fashion vision of power standing before him. He laughed. It was a wet, nervous sound that echoed uncomfortably over the speakers. "Serafina, honey," Adrian said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a condescending purr that the microphone unfortunately picked up with crystal clarity. "You've clearly had a bit too much to drink before coming here. This is a business gala. Aurelius is a multinational private equity firm, not a gardening club. Now let's get you a car." He reached out to touch her shoulder, a gesture meant to look comforting, but was visibly controlling. Serafina didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head, her diamond earrings catching the spotlight. "Step back, Adrian." The command was soft, but it cracked like a whip. Adrian froze. "You think I'm drunk?" Serafina asked, turning to the audience. She scanned the room, making eye contact with Benedict Thorne and the other men who had laughed at her expense mere minutes ago. "My husband seems to be under the impression that the Aurelius Group is a ghost. He told you all that he didn't care who ran it, as long as the money was green. Isn't that right, Adrian?" Adrian's face was beginning to redden. "Serafina, stop this. You are humiliating yourself." "No, darling. I'm clarifying the terms of your surrender," she corrected. She signaled to the side of the stage. A man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped out from the shadows. Adrian recognized him immediately. It was Julian Banks, the terrifyingly expensive corporate attorney from Crandall and Moore. Adrian had tried to hire him twice and was rejected both times. Julian was carrying a leather portfolio. He walked up to the podium, ignored Adrian entirely, and handed the portfolio to Serafina. "Thank you, Julian," she said. She opened the folder and pulled out a thick document bound in navy blue. "This," Serafina announced, holding up the document, "is the acquisition contract Blackwood Dynamics signed electronically 3 days ago. It details the injection of $500 million in exchange for a 40% controlling stake and 3 board seats." She turned the page with a deliberate, slow rustle that seemed to thunder through the quiet room. "However," she continued, her eyes locking onto Adrian's, "there is a clause on page 42. Clause 11C, the moral turpitude and competency clause. Adrian, did you read page 42 before you signed?" Adrian swallowed hard. He hadn't read page 42. He hadn't read past page 5. He had been too busy picking out a diamond bracelet for Chloe to bother with the fine print. He had left that to his legal team, a legal team that he suddenly realized with a sinking pit in his stomach had been strangely quiet lately. I have lawyers for that," Adrian stammered, his bravado crumbling. "Your lawyers work for the company, Adrian," Serafina said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "And since I now own the controlling interest of the company's debt, they work for me." "That's a lie." Chloe Vane's shrill voice cut through the tension. The young model stomped up the stairs to the stage, her red dress flowing behind her. She looked furious, her face flushed. She wasn't used to being ignored, and she certainly wasn't used to being upstaged by a woman twice her age. "You're lying," Chloe spat, standing next to Adrian and clutching his arm. "Adrian built this company from nothing. You're just a bitter housewife trying to ruin his big night because he doesn't want you anymore. Security. Get her off the stage." The room gasped. The audacity was breathtaking. Serafina looked at Chloe. She didn't look angry. She looked at Chloe with the mild curiosity one might have for a bug on a windshield. "And you must be Chloe," Serafina said calmly. "The business consultant. Tell me, Chloe, does your consulting fee cover the PR disaster you're currently causing?" "Adrian, do something!" Chloe screeched. Adrian, realizing he was losing control of the narrative, tried to grab the microphone back. "This is insane. The deal is off. I'm cancelling the contract. I don't need your money, Serafina. I'll find another investor. Anyone here would back me." He looked out at the crowd, desperate. "Benedict George. You know the numbers. Blackwood Dynamics is a gold mine." Benedict Thorne, down in the front row, slowly set his glass down. He looked from the sweating, desperate Adrian to the icy, composed Serafina. He checked his phone, presumably looking at the stock ticker or news alerts. "Actually, Adrian," Benedict called out, his voice carrying easily, "I think I'll wait to see how this plays out. The market doesn't like volatility." "The deal is not off, Adrian," Serafina said, stepping back to the mic. "Because you already spent the first tranche of the money. $50 million was wired to the corporate accounts yesterday morning, and by noon it was gone, used to pay off the overdue loans you hid from the board." The crowd murmured. Financial fraud, hiding debt. This was blood in the water. "You took the money," Serafina said, her voice dropping an octave, deadly serious, "which means the contract is valid. And clause 11C states that if the CEO engages in public conduct that damages the reputation of the firm, say for example, bringing a mistress to the annual shareholder gala while his wife is still legally listed as a co-founder, the majority investor has the right to terminate the CEO's position, effective immediately." Adrian stumbled back as if physically struck. You can't fire me. It's my company. It has my name on the building." Serafina closed the portfolio with a snap. Actually, darling, she said, leaning in close, her voice a whisper that screamed across the ballroom. It's my name, too. I just happen to wear it better. She turned to the security guards, standing confused at the edge of the stage. Escort Mr. Blackwood and his guest out of the building. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes in the executive suite. Adrian, you're not invited. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the head of security, a burly man who had worked for the company for 15 years and whose daughter's college tuition Serafina had quietly helped pay for when Adrian refused a raise, stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, the guard said, his face stone cold. Please come with us. Don't make a scene. You work for me, Adrian roared, veins bulging in his neck. Not anymore, sir, the guard said. He took Adrian firmly by the elbow. Chloe shrieked as another guard gestured for her to leave. This is illegal. I'm going to sue you. Who do you think you are? Serafina watched them being dragged away. Adrian shouting obscenities. Chloe crying about her shoes. She waited until the double doors slammed shut, sealing them out. She turned back to the stunned room. She took a sip of water from the podium. My apologies for the interruption, Serafina said, her voice shifting instantly from executioner to gracious hostess. The open bar will remain open for another hour. Please enjoy the evening. The Aurelius Group looks forward to a prosperous future with all of you. As the room erupted into chaotic chatter and applause, mostly out of sheer shock and respect for the brutality they had just witnessed, Serafina walked off the stage. She didn't smile. The victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash. But it was necessary. Julian the lawyer fell into step beside her. That went well, he noted dryly. You decimated him. It's not over, Julian, Serafina said, staring straight ahead as they walked toward the elevators. Adrian is a narcissist. He won't go quietly. He'll try to burn the company down just to sack me. We need to lock the servers before he gets remote access. Already done, Julian assured her. But Serafina, are you okay? She paused at the elevator doors, catching her reflection in the polished brass. Ask me that when I have my company back, she said. To understand how a soft-spoken woman who spent her weekends volunteering at the local library became the ruthless architect of Adrian Blackwood's destruction, you have to go back 3 years. You have to go back to the Tokyo incident. It was a Tuesday in November. Serafina's mother, a formidable woman named Catherine, who had taught Serafina everything she knew about stoicism and mathematics, had suffered a massive stroke. Serafina had called Adrian 20 times. He was supposed to be in a board meeting in San Francisco. Then he said he had to fly to Tokyo for an emergency supplier negotiation. I can't talk now, Sarah. The signal is choppy, he had said in a voicemail. Big deal. Life or death for the company. I'll call when I land. He never called. Catherine died 14 hours later, holding Serafina's hand. Serafina sat in the hospital room, the silence deafening, realizing she was truly alone. 3 days later, while planning the funeral, Serafina saw it. It wasn't in a tabloid. It was on a friend's social media feed, a photo from a private party in Cabo San Lucas. Not Tokyo, Cabo. In the background of a selfie taken by a minor celebrity, there was Adrian. He was wearing a linen shirt, holding a margarita, and kissing the neck of a blonde woman who was decidedly not a supplier. It wasn't the infidelity that broke her. It was the timing. It was the fact that while she was watching the light fade from her mother's eyes, he was partying in a villa, lying to her without a second thought. That was the moment the sadness evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard diamond of rage formed in her chest. She didn't confront him when he returned, smelling of expensive lotion and lies. She didn't scream. She played the part. She cooked his dinner. She listened to his fake stories about the tough negotiations in Japan. But while he slept, she went to work. Most people, including Adrian, forgot that Serafina wasn't just a pretty face he met at a charity auction. Before they married, she had been a quantitative analyst for a top-tier hedge fund. She understood algorithms, market trends, and risk better than Adrian understood his own product. She started digging. She accessed the family accounts. She found the siphoning. Adrian wasn't just cheating on her emotionally. He was cheating the company financially to fund his lifestyle. The private jets, the jewelry for mistresses, the gambling debts in Macau. It was all being buried under consulting fees and R&D. She knew if she divorced him, then he would hide the assets. He would drag it out in court for years. She would get a settlement, sure, but he would keep the power. He would keep the company she had helped him build in the early days, back when she wrote the original business plan at their kitchen table. She didn't want a settlement. She wanted justice. She remembered a man her mother had known, Silas Grand. Silas was a legend in the financial world, a recluse who had made billions in the 90s and then vanished to a ranch in Montana. He hated the flashy, new money tech bros like Adrian. He valued loyalty and intellect. Serafina took a flight to Montana. She showed up at his gate in a rental car. She waited for 6 hours until he agreed to see her. They sat on his porch drinking bitter coffee. Serafina laid out the spreadsheets she had compiled. She showed him Adrian's fraud. She showed him the technical flaws in Blackwood Dynamics' new flagship product. "The company is a shell," Serafina told the old man. "He's hollowed it out. The stock is inflated by hype. When the Q4 earnings come out next year, it's going to crash." Silas looked at her over the rim of his mug. "So you want me to short the stock? Make a quick buck on your husband's failure?" "No," Serafina said. "I want to buy it. I want to buy the debt when it crashes. I want to take it over. I know how to fix it. I know where the real value is. But I need capital." Silas studied her. He saw the grief she was hiding and the steel underneath it. "And what happens to Adrian?" Silas asked. "He loses the only thing he actually loves," Serafina replied. "His audience." Silas grinned, revealing gold-capped teeth. "I like you, kid. You remind me of a shark I used to know. Her name was Catherine." "She was my mother," Serafina said softly. Silas's expression softened. He put the mug down. "Then let's go hunting." With Silas's backing, they formed the Aurelius Group. The name was Serafina's choice, named after Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor. The best revenge is to be unlike him, who performed the injury. For 2 years, Serafina lived a double life. By day, she was the dutiful, boring wife. She attended the luncheons. She ignored the lipstick on Adrian's collars. She played the fool. By night, she was the managing director of Aurelius. She communicated with Silas via encrypted servers. They slowly, methodically bought up the third-party debt of Blackwood Dynamics. They purchased the loans from the banks that were getting nervous about Adrian's spending. They became the invisible hand tightening around Adrian's throat. And Adrian, in his arrogance, never looked. He assumed the Aurelius Group was just another faceless institutional investor. He was so busy chasing Chloe Vane and feeling like a god that he didn't notice the walls closing in. The trap was set 6 months ago. Adrian made a fatal error. He tried to acquire a competitor, Nebula Systems, to boost his stock price. It was a terrible deal. Nebula was failing. Serafina, acting as Aurelius, encouraged the deal through intermediaries. She knew it would drain Blackwood's cash reserves. Adrian took the bait. He drained the company accounts to buy Nebula. The stock price wobbled. The cash flow dried up. He needed a lifeline. He needed $500 million fast, or payroll would bounce. That was when Aurelius stepped in with the offer. The Savior package. Serafina remembered the night Adrian came home beaming after receiving the term sheet. "I saved the company, Sarah," he had bragged, pouring himself a drink. "I got this massive fund to back us. They didn't even ask for a board seat interview. They just trust my vision." "That's wonderful, Adrian," she had said, looking up from her book. "You must be very proud." "I am," he said. "It proves that I'm untouchable." He had no idea that the woman sitting 10 feet away had drafted the term sheet. He had no idea she had included Clause 11C specifically because she knew he was planning to take Chloe to the gala. She had baited the hook with his own ego, and tonight at the Plaza Hotel, he had swallowed it whole. Back in the penthouse elevator, rising toward the silent apartment that was no longer a home, Serafina finally allowed herself to lean against the wall. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. She had done it. She had pulled the trigger. But as the elevator chimed, signaling her arrival, she realized the war wasn't over. Adrian was cornered, humiliated, and stripped of his crown. But a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. And there was one thing she hadn't accounted for. As the elevator doors opened, she saw a figure sitting in her living room in the dark. It wasn't Adrian. It was a man in a trench coat, holding a tablet. He stood up as she entered. "Mrs. Blackwood," the man said. "My name is Detective Miller, NYPD Financial Crimes Division." Serafina's heart stopped. "How did you get in here?" "Your husband called us," the detective said, his face grim. "He claims you embezzled the funds to set up the Aurelius Group. He claims you stole his identity to approve the wire transfers. We need you to come down to the station." Serafina stared at him. Adrian played fast. He was accusing her of the fraud he had committed, spinning the narrative before the ink was even dry. She straightened her spine. The shaking in her hands stopped. "Let me get my coat, detective," she said coolly. "And you might want to call the district attorney, because I have 3 terabytes of data that say my husband is going to prison, not me." The game had just entered level 2. The fluorescent lights of the 19th Precinct interrogation room hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. Serafina sat at the metal table, her hands folded calmly over the emerald fabric of her gown. The contrast was jarring, a woman dressed for a coronation, sitting in a room designed for criminals. Detective Miller tossed a file onto the table. "Your husband tells a very convincing story, Mrs. Blackwood." "I'm sure he does," Serafina replied, her voice steady. "Adrian could sell ice to a polar bear. It's how he built his company. It's also how he defrauded it." "He says you had access to the corporate accounts," Miller said, leaning back in his chair. "He says you've been funneling money out for 2 years into offshore accounts in the Caymans. He claims the Aurelius Group is funded by stolen money from Blackwood Dynamics. If that's true, you're looking at 20 years for grand larceny and corporate espionage." The door buzzed open. Julian Banks. Serafina's lawyer swept in like a storm front. He didn't look tired. He looked ready for war. "Detective Miller," Julian said, placing a heavy briefcase on the table. "Unless you are arresting my client, she is leaving. Now." "We're just having a chat, counselor," Miller said, though he sat up straighter. "Good. Then you can chat with this." Julian unlocked the briefcase and slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "These are the forensic accounting records for the Aurelius Group. Every cent of capital raised came from two sources: the private estate of Mr. Silas Grand and Mrs. Blackwood's own trading profits, verified by the SEC. There isn't a single penny from Blackwood Dynamics." Miller opened the file, his eyebrows shooting up as he saw the name Silas Grand. In New York, that name carried more weight than the mayor's. "Furthermore," Julian continued, "here is the audit trail of the money Mr. Blackwood claims was stolen. It wasn't stolen, it was spent by him on private jets, five-star hotels, and a lease for a loft in Soho occupied by a Miss Chloe Vane. We have the credit card receipts, the IP addresses used to authorize the transfers, and the geolocation data from Mr. Blackwood's phone matching the times of the transactions." Serafina leaned forward. "Adrian is accusing me of the crime he committed, Detective. He's trying to muddy the waters. He knows that if I'm under investigation, the SEC will freeze the takeover. He's buying time." Miller looked at the documents, then at Serafina. He closed the file. "You can go," Miller grunted, "but don't leave the city. I need to bring Mr. Blackwood in for a clarification." Serafina stood up, smoothing her dress. "He won't come in, Detective. He'll go on TV." Serafina was right. By the time she and Julian stepped out of the precinct, the sun was rising over Manhattan, and the media war had already begun. Adrian hadn't gone home. He had gone straight to the studio of the Daily Break, the most popular morning news show in the country. Serafina watched the broadcast from the back seat of her car. Adrian looked devastated on screen. He wasn't wearing the tuxedo anymore. He was wearing a humble button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, vulnerable. He was acting his heart out. "I don't know who that woman was last night," Adrian told the sympathetic host. "I've been working 100-hour weeks to save our company, to save jobs. And my wife, she's been suffering from some mental health struggles since her mother passed. I think she created this fantasy, this hostile takeover, as a cry for help. I forgive her. I just want her to get the help she needs." He wiped a fake tear from his eye. "The woman I saw on stage, that wasn't my Serafina. That was someone hurt and confused. I just hope the investors understand that this is a private family matter, not a corporate crisis." Serafina turned off the iPad. Her hands were clenched into fists. "He's good," Julian admitted quietly. "He's pivoting. He's painting you as unstable. The stock price dropped 12% this morning. The board is getting nervous. They might block your entry to the building." "He's playing the victim," Serafina said, staring out at the passing city. "He knows the board is full of old men who fear change. If they think I'm an emotional, scorned wife, they'll back him even with the contract." "So what's the move?" Julian asked. Serafina's eyes hardened. "He wants to make this about family, fine. Let's make it about family." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Who are you calling?" "Every secret has a price, Julian," Serafina said. "Adrian thinks Chloe is his ally, but he just went on national television and called our marriage a tragedy and said he wants to fix things. How do you think his mistress feels about that?" 3 days later, the atmosphere in the Blackwood Dynamics boardroom was toxic. The room was dominated by a 30-foot mahogany table. At the head sat the chairman of the board, Archibald Graham, a man so old he looked like he was held together by starch and spite. Along the sides sat the other board members, 6 men and 1 woman, all looking uncomfortable. Serafina sat at the opposite end of the table from Archibald. She was wearing a sharp white suit today, the color of mourning in some cultures, the color of a blank slate in others. Julian sat beside her. Adrian was there too. Technically, he had been suspended, but Archibald had allowed him to attend to defend his legacy. He sat to Archibald's right, looking smug. The sympathy tour in the media had worked. The narrative had shifted. Now people were whispering that Serafina was a vindictive ex trying to destroy a visionary genius. "This meeting is called to order," Archibald wheezed. "We are here to discuss the validity of the Aurelius contract and the leadership of this company." He peered over his spectacles at Serafina. "Mrs. Blackwood, while your financial maneuvering was impressive, the board feels that a hostile change of leadership at this delicate time would be disastrous. We are prepared to offer you a buyout. We will return your capital with a 10% premium provided you step down and dissolve the contract." Adrian smirked. "It's a generous offer, Serafina. Take it. Go to Paris. Buy some shoes." Serafina didn't look at Adrian. She kept her eyes on Archibald. "The contract is binding, Mr. Chairman," she said calmly, "and I am not here for a payout. I am here to stop this company from bleeding to death. Adrian has burned through $50 million in 3 months. His acquisition of Nebula Systems was a catastrophe based on vanity, not value. Vision requires risk." Adrian slammed his hand on the table. "You don't understand tech, Serafina. You're a number cruncher. I'm the soul of this company." "The soul is corrupt," Serafina countered. "Enough," Archibald barked. "We will put it to a vote. The motion is to void the moral turpitude clause and reinstate Adrian Blackwood as CEO, relegating the Aurelius Group to a silent partner role." Serafina's heart hammered against her ribs. She counted the heads. Archibald was with Adrian. So were 3 others. It was going to be close. Too close. "All in favor?" Archibald asked. 4 hands went up. Adrian smiled. "All opposed." 3 hands went up. "The motion carries," Archibald declared. "Adrian stays. Mrs. Blackwood, we will have legal draw up the buyout papers." Adrian stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Thank you, gentlemen. You made the right choice. No hard feelings, Sarah. Business is business." Serafina sat frozen. She had the money, she had the law, but she had lost the politics. She had underestimated the boys' club. "Wait!" The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing there, looking less like a model and more like an avenging angel, was Chloe Vane. She wasn't wearing a red dress today. She was wearing jeans and a leather jacket. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Who let her in?" Adrian snapped. "Chloe, not now. I'll call you later." "You won't be calling anyone, Adrian," Chloe said, her voice shaking but loud. She walked into the room. She held up a flash drive. "Security!" Adrian yelled. "Get her out." "If you touch me," Chloe said to the guard, who stepped forward, "I will upload this to Twitter right now, and I have 3 million followers." Archibald looked nervous. "What is that young lady?" Chloe looked at Adrian with pure hatred. 3 days ago you went on TV and said you wanted to fix your marriage. You told me to lay low and that I was just a fling to blow off steam. You told me you loved me, Adrian. You promised me half of everything once you got rid of her." She pointed at Serafina. "But you're a liar," Chloe said. "And I recorded everything." She tossed the flash drive onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped in front of Archibald. "What is on this drive?" Archibald asked, eyeing it like a bomb. "Recordings," Chloe said. "From the bedroom, from the car, but mostly from his phone calls with you, Archibald." Archibald went pale. "He calls you the fossil," Chloe said, her voice dripping with venom. "He said you're senile and that he's just waiting for you to die so he can dismantle the board. He brags about how he bribed the auditors to overlook the missing funds in the Q3 report funds that you signed off on Archibald. The room went dead silent. Bribery. Auditing fraud. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was prison time for everyone involved. Adrian lunged for the drive. "She's lying, it's deep fake." Julian Banks was faster. He slapped his hand over the drive before Adrian could grab it. "I think we should hear it," Julian said, his smile razor-sharp. He plugged the drive into the presentation laptop. Adrian's voice filled the room, clear and arrogant. "Old man Graham doesn't have a clue. I moved the debt to the shell company in Cyprus. As long as Graham gets his bonus, he won't ask questions. He's a greedy old dinosaur. Once Serafina is out of the way, I'll force him into retirement. I run this show." The recording clicked off. Adrian stood alone at the side of the table. He looked at Archibald. The old man's face had turned a dangerous shade of purple. "You," Archibald whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "I protected you. I treated you like a son." "It's taken out of context," Adrian pleaded, sweat pouring down his face. "Archibald, listen to me." "You are finished," Archibald spat. He turned to the rest of the board. "I am retracting my previous vote. I move to terminate Adrian Blackwood effectively immediately for cause and to initiate a full internal investigation into the Q3 audit." "Seconded," said the board member to his left, looking at Adrian with disgust. "Thirded," said another. Archibald looked at Serafina. He looked tired, defeated, and suddenly very respectful. "Mrs. Blackwood," Archibald said, "it appears the position of CEO is vacant, as the majority debt holder. Do you have a nomination?" Serafina stood up. She looked at Chloe, who was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Serafina gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of thanks. Chloe didn't smile, but she nodded back, an uneasy truce born of mutual destruction. Serafina looked at Adrian. He was slumped in his chair, head in his hands. The king was dead. "I do have a nomination," Serafina said, her voice ringing clear and strong. "Me." The takeover didn't happen overnight. Real life isn't a fairy tale where the wicked witch melts and the flowers immediately bloom. It was a grind. It was 6 months of forensic audits, SEC hearings, and late nights that turned into early mornings. But the moment Adrian Blackwood was escorted out of the Blackwood Dynamics building, not by private security, but by federal agents from the Southern District of New York, the air in the city seemed to change. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying corporate records, and insider trading. It turned out the Tokyo incident 3 years ago wasn't just an affair. It was also when Adrian had begun laundering company funds through a shell corporation in the Caribbean to cover his gambling debts. Serafina watched the arrest from the floor-to-ceiling window of the CEO's office, her office now. She saw the paparazzi swarm him. She saw Adrian shield his face with a suit jacket, a gesture of shame from a man who had once lived for the spotlight. She didn't feel joy. She felt a profound, quiet relief. The tumor had been excised. Now the healing could begin. The first thing Serafina did was rebrand. Blackwood Dynamics was dead. The name was poisoned, associated with fraud and arrogance. She renamed the company Aurelius Systems. It was a nod to the philosophy that had saved her stoicism in the face of chaos. She kept her promise to the employees. While the board members who had enabled Adrian, including Archibald Graham, were quietly forced into retirement to avoid prosecution, The engineers and support staff kept their jobs. Serafina implemented a profit-sharing model that Adrian had always sneered at. Morale soared. Productivity tripled. The stock price, after a volatile month, stabilized and then began a steady, healthy climb. One rainy Tuesday, about a month after the boardroom coup, Serafina's assistant buzzed her. Ms. Hart. Serafina had legally reverted to her maiden name Hart the day the divorce papers were filed. There is a Miss Vane here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. Should I send her away? Serafina paused her pen, hovering over a contract. No, send her in. Chloe Vane looked different. The expensive designer clothes were gone, replaced by a modest trench coat and flats. She looked younger, stripped of the artifice. She stood awkwardly in the doorway of the office she had once hoped to rule by proxy. I didn't come to ask for money, Chloe said quickly, her hands fidgeting with her bag. I didn't offer any, Serafina replied, gesturing to a chair. Sit. Chloe sat. I wanted to say I'm leaving New York. I'm moving back to Ohio. My sister lives there. I'm going to go to nursing school. Serafina studied her. She could have destroyed Chloe. She could have sued her for the money Adrian spent on her. But Serafina realized that Chloe was just collateral damage, a symptom of Adrian's disease, not the cause. Why tell me? Serafina asked. Because you were the only one who told me the truth, Chloe whispered. Everyone else, Adrian included, just told me what I wanted to hear. You looked me in the eye and told me I was being a fool. You were right. Serafina opened her desk drawer. She pulled out a small envelope. It wasn't a check. It was a letter of recommendation. Not for a job, but a character reference for a rental apartment in Ohio vouching for Chloe's stability. It was a small thing, but with Chloe's name dragged through the mud in the tabloids, it was invaluable. Start over, Chloe, Serafina said, sliding the envelope across the desk. And pick better men. Chloe took the envelope, tears welling in her eyes. He called me, you know, from the detention center. He wanted me to smuggle a phone in for him. He didn't ask how I was. He just wanted a favor. That sounds like Adrian, Serafina said dryly. I hung up, Chloe said. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and looked at Serafina with genuine respect. Goodbye, Ms. Hart. Goodbye, Chloe. The final loose end was Adrian himself. A year later, Serafina found herself in a sterile visiting room at the Otisville Correctional Facility. It was a medium-security prison upstate, famous for housing white-collar criminals. She hadn't planned to come, but she needed to sign the final papers transferring his remaining liquefied assets to the company to pay off the last of the creditors. When Adrian walked in, he looked smaller. The granite jawline was hidden under a scruffy, graying beard. His posture, once commanding, was slumped. He wore a beige jumpsuit that washed out his complexion. He sat down on the other side of the plexiglass. He picked up the phone. You look expensive, Adrian said. His voice was raspy. Is that the new Chanel collection? It is, Serafina said. Just sign the papers, Adrian. He looked at the documents she slid through the slot. He didn't pick up the pen immediately. I hear the company is doing well, he said, a hint of bitterness in his tone. Record profits in Q4. You launched the AI integration I always talked about. I launched the functional version, Serafina corrected. Not the vaporware you were selling. Adrian sighed, leaning his forehead against the glass. I built that place, Sarah. It was mine. No, Adrian, she said softly. We built it, I wrote the code. I balanced the books. You just sold the tickets. And somewhere along the way you started believing your own sales pitch. He looked up, his eyes searching hers for a trace of the woman who used to wait up for him, the woman who used to forgive him. "I miss you," he said. It was a manipulation, of course, but there was a sliver of truth in it. He missed the safety she provided. He missed the audience. Serafina looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. The anger was gone. The love was long gone. All that was left was pity for a man who had everything and threw it away for an illusion of more. "You don't miss me, Adrian," she said, standing up. "You miss the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes. You miss feeling important." She tapped the glass over the papers. "Sign the papers. It's the last business transaction of your life." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, with a shaking hand, he signed. Serafina took the papers. She didn't say goodbye. There was no need. She turned and walked out of the grey prison, stepping into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. A black car was waiting. Julian Banks was leaning against the door, checking his watch. "Done?" Julian asked. "Done," Serafina said. "Good. We have a meeting with the investors from Tokyo in 3 hours. Real ones this time." Serafina smiled. It was the first time in years her smile reached her eyes. She got into the car, and as they drove away, she didn't look back at the prison. She looked at the road ahead. She wasn't the billionaire's wife anymore. She wasn't the victim. She was Serafina Hart, and she was just getting started. And that is the story of how Serafina Blackwood turned a public humiliation into the ultimate power move. She proved that in this game of business and love, the most dangerous person in the room is the one you overlook. Adrian thought he was the king, but he forgot that in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. What do you think? Did Serafina take it too far, or did Adrian get exactly what he deserved? And honestly, would you have forgiven Chloe? Or would you have destroyed her too? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, justice, and high-stakes drama, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid his ticket from his family for 10 years. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.